The sound of tearing fabric cut through the air like a blade through silence. The entire bar froze. On Layla's back, a black woman whose hands still trembled from sleepless nights was a Delta tattoo and Purple Heart inscription. The Viper leader who'd been so cocky suddenly stood there like his connection had lagged. Then he pulled out a knife. And from that moment, this town was never the same again. Where are you watching from? Comment your city and hit subscribe on Black Stories Box to hear how this all ended up in court with him getting his comeuppance. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I witnessed what happened that Friday night at Dockside Pete's when everything changed. What started as routine intimidation became the spark that lit up an entire community's fight against years of silent oppression. Every Friday night felt like a ritual at Dockside Pete's. The rumble of motorcycle engines would shake the windows, and Pete McGrath would quietly prepare the usual envelope, $500 cash. It was the price of peace, or so we told ourselves. I'd been watching this dance for months from my corner table, nursing the same beer while pretending to grade papers from my teaching job. But my eyes always found Layla Chen, the bartender, who moved with the careful precision of someone who'd seen too much violence overseas. Layla wore long sleeves, even in summer, had this habit of scanning the room every 30 seconds like she was still in hostile territory. Her eyes were shadowed from waking up at 3:17 a.m. I knew because she'd mentioned it once how the nightmares always came at the exact same time. She avoided physical contact, flinched when glasses broke too loudly. Real trauma, not the kind people fake for sympathy. When Tank Morrison and his steel Vipers roared up that night, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tank swaggered in like he owned the place, all 250 pounds of him covered in leather and ignorance. His boys spread out behind him, men who'd turned their lack of purpose into someone else's problem. Evening Pete Tank's voice carried that particular brand of false friendliness that comes before demands. Hope business is good, real good, because we're thinking about expanding our protection services. Pete, 67 years old, and a Vietnam vet, just nodded toward the bar where the envelope waited. But Tank wasn't in a hurry tonight. He was performing. You know what I love about America? Tank announced to the room, voice getting louder. Real Americans taking care of real American businesses. Not like all this border mess we got going on. People coming here, taking jobs, changing our neighborhoods. His eyes swept the room, landing on Layla. Speaking of which, where exactly you from, sweetheart? You got that mixed look going on. Layla kept pouring beer, her movements steady despite the tension. I'm from here, sir. Born in Seattle. Huh. Tank stepped closer, invading her space. Funny how here keeps expanding, ain't it, boys? His crew laughed on cue. Seattle. That's one of them sanctuary cities, right? Full of bleeding hearts and Tank. Pete's voice carried warning. Take your money and go. But Tank was just getting started. He reached out and touched Layla's hair, making her freeze. Real pretty. Bet you got some interesting stories about affirmative action, huh? Must be nice getting hired for checking boxes instead of actual qualifications. That's when something unexpected happened. Marcus Thompson, a 70-year-old Marine veteran sitting at the far end of the bar, stood up and walked over. He pulled out a $100 bill and placed it deliberately in Layla's tip jar. This money's for decency, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Something you can't seem to buy around here. The room went still. Nobody had ever challenged Tank directly. I felt my heart racing, knowing this moment would change everything. But none of us knew how much. In the corner, Elena Valdez, who ran the corner grocery store, had been quietly recording on her phone, live streaming to her granddaughter in Phoenix. Mija, you seeing this? She whispered into the camera. Sometimes you gotta witness history. Tank's face went red. This wasn't how his Friday night collection was supposed to go. People were supposed to look away, pay up, stay quiet. The old man's defiance had thrown off his entire script. What did you say? Gramps Marcus didn't back down. I said you can't buy decency. And son, you're about to learn why that matters. The bar held its breath. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just another shakedown. It was the beginning of something bigger. Tank's face cycled through several emotions before settling on rage. You know what, old man, I think it's time we raised our rates. Pete, make that $800 monthly. And since we're talking about values, he turned back to Layla, who was still carefully pouring drinks like nothing had happened. Her professionalism in the face of harassment was something I'd seen before, the way soldiers compartmentalize to survive. I've been thinking about this whole diversity hire situation, Tank continued, his voice getting nastier. All these programs giving jobs to people who didn't earn them. Affirmative action, this equal opportunity that, real Americans getting passed over for his hand shot out and grabbed Layla's sleeve. She pulled back instinctively, and the fabric tore with a sound that cut through every conversation in the room. The overhead light fell across Layla's exposed shoulder blade, revealing ink that made the entire bar go silent. A Delta Force sword with 3 lightning bolts. Below it in precise military font, Purple Heart recipient. Even the jukebox seemed to stop breathing. I watched Tank's face go through every stage of recognition and panic. This wasn't some bartender he could intimidate. This was a decorated combat veteran. His whole worldview had just been shattered by reality. Miguel Santos, one of Tank's own riders, stared at the tattoo with the stunned recognition of someone who'd served overseas himself. I could see him connecting dots the way Layla moved her awareness, the 3 a.m. nightmares she'd mentioned. Another veteran recognizing the signs. That's stolen valor, Tank stammered, grasping for control of the narrative. Probably fake. Lots of people get military tattoos these days. Layla turned slowly, her voice deadly calm. Don't touch me again. But Tank had already gone too far to back down. His hand went to his belt and the knife came out, 4 inches of steel that caught the light like a promise of violence. That's when Layla's military training kicked in. One smooth movement and Tank's wrist was locked, his arm twisted behind his back, face pressed against the bar. Professional controlled no unnecessary force. I said, "Don't touch me." The room exploded into motion. Pete hit the panic button under the register. Marcus moved to block the exit. Elena's live stream was suddenly pulling in viewers from across the country as word spread through social media that something real was happening in this small coastal town. But the biggest surprise came from Tank's own crew. Miguel stepped forward, his Viper jacket suddenly feeling heavy on his shoulders. "Tank man, we need to go. Now." For the first time that night, Tank looked genuinely confused. His own guys weren't backing him up. The room had turned against him. And the woman he'd tried to intimidate was clearly trained to handle much more dangerous situations than a bar fight. Pete's voice cut through the tension, cameras still rolling. "Tank, smile for the audience." Tank looked up and saw the security camera he thought he'd disabled weeks ago, its red light blinking steadily. Elena's phone was still streaming live. His humiliation was being broadcast in real time. "This ain't over," he snarled, but his voice carried more desperation than threat. As the Vipers filed out, I noticed Miguel hang back, making eye contact with Layla. Some kind of understanding passed between them, veteran to veteran. He nodded once before following his crew into the night. The bar slowly returned to normal, but everyone knew something fundamental had shifted. Layla rolled down her sleeve and went back to work, but the secret was out. This woman they'd watched serve drinks for months was a decorated war hero who just handled a 250-pound biker like he was a training dummy. Marcus finished his beer and left another 20 in the tip jar. "Semper Fi," he said quietly as he headed for the door. Elena ended her live stream with over 3,000 viewers and climbing. "That's how it's done, Misha. That's how you stand up." By Saturday morning, the social media war had begun. The Coastal Patriots Facebook group exploded with a post that made my stomach churn: "Bartender caught in stolen valor scam." Local black woman claims to be decorated veteran Tank had rallied his online supporters using edited clips from Elena's live stream to create a completely different narrative. The comments section was a cesspool of racism wrapped in patriotic rhetoric. Fake accounts shared the post thousands of times with hashtags like #stolenvalor and #fakevet. But Tank had underestimated who he was dealing with. I was grading papers at the diner across from Pete's when I saw Layla arrive that morning with a manila folder and a small lockbox. She'd called Rebecca Torres, a local reporter who'd been investigating corruption in our town council for months. What happened next was masterful. No lawyer, no PR team, just a combat veteran who understood the importance of documentation. Layla spread her papers across a table: DD, 214 discharge papers, commendation letters, medical records documenting her Purple Heart injury. The lockbox contained USB drives from Pete's security system and photographed copies of everything. Then she did something that silenced every keyboard warrior in a 50-mile radius. She live-streamed for 15 minutes, not defending herself, not arguing about stolen valor. Instead, she read the names of 7 soldiers from her unit who didn't make it home. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, 26, 2 daughters. Specialist David Kim, 22, Purple Heart posthumous. Corporal Maria Santos, 24, posthumous Bronze Star. The names kept coming. Her voice never wavered, but tears ran down her cheeks. When she finished, she looked directly into the camera. "Those are the heroes. I'm just someone who was lucky enough to come home. If you want to talk about valor, talk about them." The live stream had 12,000 viewers by the time she signed off. The comments weren't from trolls anymore, they were from veterans, family members, and people who recognized real grief when they saw it. Marcus stopped by that afternoon with his own folder. "Fought in 2 wars, he told Rebecca. "Never seen anyone fake it who could recite casualty lists from memory. That kind of pain doesn't come from Google, but the most interesting development came in my email that evening." An anonymous message with photos attached Tank Morrison having dinner with City Councilman Richard Brennan. On the table between them was an envelope thick enough to choke a horse. The photos were time-stamped from 3 different collection nights. Someone in Tank's crew was documenting their meetings with city officials. Rebecca called me back within an hour. "Sarah, I need you to look at something. Richard Brennan's been pushing a development project for luxury condos right where Pete's bar sits. Keeps talking about cleaning up the waterfront and removing eyesores." The pieces started clicking together. Tank wasn't just running a protection racket, he was a tool for gentrification. Intimidate the old businesses, make them fail, then swoop in with development money. "There's more," Rebecca continued. "I've been tracking property records. 3 other businesses on that block have closed in the past year after safety concerns and neighborhood complaints. Guess who bought the properties? Brennan Development LLC. Richard's own company. Tank thought he was running a simple extortion scheme, but he was actually being used to displace an entire community. The racism was just a bonus, a way to make it look like righteous community action instead of calculated greed. That night, Layla and Pete sealed the week's protection money in evidence bags complete with latex gloves and chain of custody documentation. They certified mail packages to Detective Amanda Park at the county sheriff's office and copied the state attorney general. 30 years in the Army teaches you how to follow procedure, Pete explained, as he signed each evidence tag. "These boys want to play games with a decorated veteran. Let's play by military rules." The envelope containing photos of Tank's dinner meetings went into a separate package. By Monday morning, law enforcement would have everything they needed to connect the dots between street-level extortion and city hall corruption. But Tank wasn't done fighting back. If the stolen valor angle wasn't working, he'd try a different approach, painting Layla as some kind of outside agitator brought in to destroy traditional American values. He had no idea he was about to lose one of his own soldiers to the other side. Rebecca's investigative piece dropped Tuesday morning like a bomb. Councilman's condo scheme. How intimidation tactics clear the way for development deals. The article laid out 2 years of systematic harassment targeting waterfront businesses. Tank's Steel Vipers weren't just running protection rackets, they were creating the public safety concerns that Brennan used to justify condemning buildings. The financial connections were damning. Brennan Construction had already purchased 3 properties along the Strip after their businesses failed. The projected profit from converting Pete's historic building into luxury condos to $3 million. Rebecca had done her homework. Property assessments, city council meeting, minutes, even Brennan's calendar showing meetings with Tank the day before each escalation. It wasn't just corruption, it was a coordinated campaign to economically displace working-class families. I was reading the article for the 3rd time when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the docks. Come alone." Miguel Santos was waiting by the pier, his Viper jacket folded over his arm like a surrender flag. 2 tours in Afghanistan had left him with shrapnel scars and enough guilt to last a lifetime. He joined the Vipers looking for brotherhood, not realizing he'd signed up for ethnic intimidation. I recorded everything he said without preamble, pulling out a small digital recorder. 3 months of Tank's meetings with Brennan, including the one where Brennan said he pressed play. Brennan's voice crackled through the speaker. "I don't care how you do it, just burn that rat hole off the map. Make it look like community concerns about safety." Tank's response was equally damning. "What about the bartender? She's getting too comfortable. Handle it. Whatever it takes to clear the property." Miguel stopped the recording. "I can't be part of threatening a Purple Heart recipient. My sister died in Kandahar. Military means something to my family." We sat in silence for a moment, watching fishing boats head out for the morning catch. This was the evidence that would end Tank's operation and probably send Brennan to prison. But it would also destroy Miguel's life. Former gang members who turn witness don't usually get retirement parties. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Just make sure Detective Park gets this. And tell Layla that not all of us forgot what service means." That afternoon, the community meeting in the parking lot behind Elena's grocery store looked like something out of a civics textbook. Layla brought homemade empanadas. Marcus brought his American flag and a folding table. Pete set up speakers borrowed from the high school. About 40 people showed up, not huge numbers but significant for a town where most people preferred to mind their own business. The conversation ranged across immigration, border security, overseas deployments, and the cost of housing. Typical small-town politics, except nobody was falling asleep. "We're not talking about abstract policy here," Marcus addressed the crowd. "We're talking about our neighbors. Elena's been paying taxes and raising kids in this community for 15 years. Layla served 3 tours in Afghanistan. These are our people." The breakthrough moment came when Dorothy Hartwell, 73 years old, and never political in her life, stood up with tears in her eyes. "My grandson did 2 tours in Iraq. When he came home, he had nightmares just like that girl behind the bar. I watched him struggle for years." She looked directly at the group of older residents who'd been quietly supporting Tank's traditional values rhetoric. I should have said something when they started hassling her. We all should have. One by one, other voices joined in. Stories about grandchildren, deployed overseas neighbors who'd helped during hard times, the difference between patriotic rhetoric and actual community values. When Miguel showed up with his evidence bag containing Tank's ledger names, amounts, threats, everything, the momentum became unstoppable. Pete formally handed over the protection money they'd been collecting for evidence. Layla provided her livestream footage. Marcus contributed witness statements from 3 other intimidated business owners. Detective Park suddenly had enough evidence to prosecute a RICO case, ongoing criminal enterprise, extortion, conspiracy, to commit arson and corruption of public officials. The Friday night collection wasn't going to go as Tank expected. That Friday, Pete made one simple modification to his usual routine. Instead of leaving all the doors open, he closed the side exit and pulled down the security gate. Only one way in, one way out. Tank rolled up with his usual swagger, but something felt different. The bar was fuller than normal. People who'd never shown up for Friday night collection before were suddenly very interested in having a beer. "Evening, Pete," Tank announced. "Hope you got our payment ready. Been thinking we might need to discuss some additional community safety measures." That's when Detective Park stepped out from behind the pool table, badge clearly visible. "Tank Morrison, you're under arrest for extortion, conspiracy, and intimidation using threats of violence." She began reading Miranda rights while Tank's face went through several shades of confusion and panic. The beauty of the setup was that everything was being live-streamed again, this time by Rebecca with permission from law enforcement. The community could watch their justice system actually work. Tank tried to play the victim card one last time. This is political persecution. They're trying to silence patriots who stand up for American values. But his own ledger was sitting on the bar as evidence showing 2 years of systematic collection from minority-owned businesses. Kind of hard to claim patriotism when the evidence shows you targeting immigrant families and veterans. The real shock came when a second patrol car pulled up outside. Through the window, I watched Detective Park arrest Richard Brennan, who'd apparently shown up thinking this was just a routine check on the bar's liquor license. Councilman Brennan Park announced for the livestream audience, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit extortion and abuse of public office." Miguel stepped forward with the recording device, his Viper jacket left in his truck. "Detective, I believe this contains evidence relevant to your investigation." The room went dead silent as Miguel pressed play. Brennan's voice ordering Tank to burn that rat hole off the map and handle Layla whatever it takes. Tank's last card was fury. "You're all destroying this community. These people are taking over our town, changing everything we built." Layla looked up from polishing glasses. She'd been working calmly through the entire arrest, making sure customers had drinks. "Tank, this community was built by people like Elena, who came here to work hard and raise their families. People like Marcus, who served his country and came home to take care of his neighbors. People like Pete, who's been serving this community for 40 years. She set down her cloth and looked directly at him. "The only thing we're destroying is your ability to profit from fear." Detective Park finished processing the scene while Rebecca documented everything for her follow-up story. The evidence bags contained enough documentation to support charges against 7 people, including 2 more city officials who'd taken money to ignore complaints about the Vipers. As Tank was loaded into the patrol car, I overheard him shouting at Miguel, "You betrayed your own crew." Miguel's response carried across the parking lot. "Nah, man. You betrayed what the crew was supposed to stand for. The bar stayed open late that night. People kept stopping by, some to congratulate Layla, others just to be part of something that felt like real community. Elena brought her guitar and played folk songs in Spanish and English. Marcus told stories about Vietnam that actually made people laugh instead of cry. But the most important moment happened around midnight when Layla finally took off her long-sleeved shirt and worked the rest of her shift in a tank top. Her scars were visible. Shrapnel wounds, surgical scars, the evidence of service that Tank had tried to erase with his stolen valor accusations. Nobody stared. Nobody asked questions. They just treated her like what she'd always been, their bartender, their neighbor, their friend. The healing had begun, but the legal process was just getting started. The preliminary hearing 3 weeks later felt like the entire town was holding its breath. I'd never seen the courthouse so packed. People took vacation days to attend, streaming in from neighboring communities who'd been following the story online. Rebecca had turned Tank's arrest into a national story about grassroots resistance to intimidation. CNN picked it up. Veterans organizations weighed in. The Coastal Patriots Facebook group had been overwhelmed by actual patriots calling out their racism. Brennan's attorney tried to argue that his client was being railroaded by outside media attention and political correctness. Tank's lawyer went with the economic anxiety defense, claiming his client was just responding to legitimate concerns about changing community demographics. Neither approach worked when Miguel's recordings played in open court. The prosecutor was methodical financial records, showing payments from Brennan to Tank, testimony from 7 business owners about systematic intimidation, evidence of coordination between the extortion scheme and development planning. But the moment that broke Tank's remaining support came when Layla took the witness stand. She didn't tell war stories or claim special treatment. She just described what it felt like to come home from 3 combat tours and be told she didn't belong in her own community. "I didn't serve overseas so I could come home and be afraid to work a regular job," she said quietly. "I didn't earn a Purple Heart so I could hide my service from neighbors who decided my skin color made me less American than they are." Tank's attorney tried to cross-examine her about divisive rhetoric and playing the race card. It backfired spectacularly when Layla calmly recited the names of her fallen unit members again, then asked which one of them was playing the race card when they died for this country. The courtroom was silent. Even Tank looked uncomfortable. When Miguel testified about the recordings, Tank's facade finally cracked completely. He stood up in the middle of Miguel's testimony and started screaming, "You're all destroying everything. This was our town. These people are taking over, changing everything we built order." The judge's gavel came down hard, but Tank wasn't finished. "We had a good thing here. Everybody knew their place, everybody got along. Now you're bringing in all these outsiders, all these people who hate America, Mr. Morrison." The judge's voice cut through the rant. "You will be silent, or you will be removed from this courtroom." But Tank had already said enough. His supposed concern for traditional values had been revealed as exactly what everyone suspected: old-fashioned racism with a patriotic paint job. Miguel looked directly at his former leader. "Tank, you didn't build anything. You just tried to tear down what other people built with their sweat and sacrifice." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: extortion, conspiracy, intimidation, hate crime enhancements. Brennan's case was even more straightforward. When faced with audio recordings of himself ordering criminal acts, he took a plea deal, resigned from office, forfeit development rights, cooperate with ongoing investigation of city corruption. The sentences were read on a Thursday morning in late fall. Tank 6 years federal prison. Brennan 4 years plus restitution. 5 other Vipers, various sentences ranging from probation to 18 months. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom, it was in what happened next. The No One Stands Alone Community Fund launched at Pete's bar 6 months after the trial. What started as a legal defense fund had evolved into something bigger: job training for veterans, small business loans for immigrant entrepreneurs, conflict resolution workshops for anyone dealing with community tensions. I watched Layla hang the new sign behind the bar: "Veterans Welcome. Safe Space." She was wearing short sleeves now, her service tattoos visible to anyone who cared to look. The nightmares hadn't completely stopped, but she'd started attending Marcus's weekly veterans support group. Miguel opened Second Chance Motors in the building where Tank used to hold court. His hiring priority: veterans transitioning to civilian life and formerly incarcerated people looking for legitimate work. 3 of his mechanics were ex-Vipers who'd testified against Tank. Elena's grocery store became the unofficial community bulletin board, where people posted job openings, housing opportunities, and invitations to cultural events. The English-Spanish conversation hour she started drew people from 3 counties. Pete installed a small plaque by the cash register dedicated to all who served their community through daily acts of courage and kindness. Visitors often asked about it, giving him a chance to tell the story of how one woman's refusal to be intimidated changed an entire town. Detective Park used the case to secure funding for a community policing initiative focused on hate crime prevention. Rebecca Torres won a state journalism award for her investigation and got hired by a major newspaper, but she still sends stories back to our local paper. The most surprising change was Marcus, who ran for city council on a platform of bringing military values to civilian leadership. His first initiative requiring all city contractors to prioritize hiring local veterans and immigrants with legal work status. Not everything was perfect. Some of Tank's supporters moved away, claiming the town had become too politically correct. A few businesses closed when they couldn't afford to operate without intimidating their competitors. Change is messy and not everyone embraces it gracefully. But on Friday nights, Pete's Bar tells a different story. Veterans from multiple generations share tables with immigrant families. Teenagers do homework while their parents attend Elena's citizenship classes in the back room. Miguel's mechanics grab beers after work alongside fishing crews and office workers. It's the kind of community Tank claimed to be protecting but had actually been preventing through fear and division. I still teach high school history, but now I have a real story to tell about how ordinary people can stand up to organized intimidation. My students study the case as an example of how democracy works when citizens engage with their institutions instead of abandoning them. Layla still works behind the bar, but she's also enrolled in the community college's counseling program. She wants to work with veterans dealing with PTSD and trauma. Turns out, she told me recently surviving combat teaches you useful skills for helping other people survive civilian life. The question I get asked most often is whether we went too far, whether Tank and his crew deserved such harsh treatment for what some people still insist was just boys being boys or economic anxiety. My answer is always the same: when someone uses fear and violence to silence their neighbors, when they target people based on race or religion or immigration status, when they corrupt public officials to profit from community division, that's not anxiety. That's terrorism with a local zip code. Layla put it more simply. Some people think tolerance means accepting intolerance. It doesn't. It means protecting the vulnerable from people who profit from fear. 6 months ago, our town was quietly dying from a combination of economic stagnation and social division. Today we're building something new, a community where service matters more than status, where diversity is treated as strength instead of threat, where veterans like Layla can serve drinks wearing short sleeves without fear. That's not political correctness, that's just correctness. The fabric that tore that Friday night revealed more than a tattoo. It revealed what happens when good people decide they're tired of being quiet, tired of looking away, tired of letting bullies define their community's values. And sometimes that's exactly what it takes to stitch a better future together. Do you think we went too far, or should we have acted sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Black Stories Box if you've ever had to find the courage to stand up when everyone else was looking away.